All right, welcome back. This is the second presentation of Chapter 7, Media and Political Information. We're talking again about the role of the media in the governing process. Let me make sure that the volume is up here. And we're talking a little bit about how important the media is. Now we're going to talk about different mediums because, again, how you get your information. Not all media sources are created equal. Some are better than others. So, one important aspect to America's media industry is that while, again, the media is oftentimes kind of viewed as this one monolithic singular entity, and while it's often described as the fourth branch of government, the reality is that the media is privately owned, corporately governed, and run on a for-profit basis. Most other democratic countries heavily subsidize what is known as public broadcasting as a way of ensuring public accountability. U.S. media companies earn most of their revenue from advertising, which creates enormous incentives for companies to attract, again, their job is to grab audiences and sell it advertising. And so American media's political coverage tends to focus on the things that attracts eyes, drama, conflict, sensationalism, not necessarily the things that put citizens in good positions to make political decisions. Talk about, again, the speculation regarding the media's profit motive as a contributing factor in Donald Trump's unexpected 2016 victory. When you think about it again, they covered him a lot. They gave him a lot of free media because his often outrageous statements, grabbed them audience share, and they were not. It's not like they were not aware of that. Mass media ownership is also a considerable, it's an issue of concern since the 1980s. Ownership of mass media has increasingly come under control of a smaller and smaller group of corporate owners. Again, the risk with concentrated media ownership is that citizens expressing opinions contrary to the corporate powers that be will have difficulty getting their viewpoints aired in the media. Media diversity, the fact that there are so many different media outlets, is actually more appearance than reality. When you think about it, most media are owned by a relatively small handful of companies, of large corporations. The trend in media ownership concentration is largely a function of the relaxation of government regulations in the 1980s and the 1990s. A main aspect of that is the Telecommunications Act, which effectively basically loosened the ownership rules. It meant, and especially dealing with what is known as cross ownership. So companies that owned a large number of newspapers could also own television companies. And you actually have a situation now in many parts of the Midwest where most of the television news you get is coming from one company, Sinclair, which is a ideologically conservative company that sells a conservative media product. So take that again for what it's worth. Again, global freedom of the press. I think we've seen things like this, and again, you would note that the United States is not considered to be among the most free in terms of freedom of the press. We don't have a shield law for journalists, and again, there is a certain amount of kind of self-censorship within the corporately owned media that prevents certain kinds of stories from getting out. That's important to keep in mind. We can do better. Modern media has been digitally transformed. Competition from free digital sources for news has put enormous pressure on traditional subscription-based news sources, especially local newspapers. There's been an enormous amount of concentration with corporations buying local newspapers and then cannibalizing their reporting staffs, forcing them to rely more and more on UPI, United Press International, and the Associated Press for their stories. Nearly half of Americans report a preference for watching news on television or streaming video, as opposed to 34% who prefer to read the news. Again, the problem with that is that reading news stories gives you more information. And again, most television and streaming news programs are based on reporting from actual print newspapers. So of adults who prefer to read the news, 63% read the news online and 54% regularly read news from social media. The digital transformation has created a reorganization of the industry that significantly affects how the news is made and how consumers learn about politics. And it is, to some extent, eroded the quality of the news as a product. There are a lot of different sources of political news. This is one of the main things we're going to talk about over the remainder of this presentation. Big tech companies like Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, the Alphabet News, like CBS and ABC, Microsoft and Facebook are becoming major journalistic actors. Alphabet is a thing. It's not CBS or ABC. Social media platforms are increasingly attracting advertising revenue, and that is actually, again, hurting the actually journalistically based news organizations. There's a growing interdependence between technology and media companies. That was illustrated with Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos' acquisition of the Washington Post. And to be fair, Bezos actually did rework the Washington Post business model and actually got it to where it was making money, where it previously had been hemorrhaging money. One of the costs of the digital transformation is the rise of citizen journalism. And one of the costs is you're seeing more and more citizen journalism, which is a plus, but there is also with it a minus as well, which is to say that again, citizen journalists don't know they're not trained journalists. And so there's less fact checking and editorial standards erode. You see more misspellings in, kind of citizen journalism than you do in professional journalism. In the midst of rising criticism of the growing influence of social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter adopted contrasting policies. Facebook cracked down on made-up news and bots, trying to influence the news, and began using fact-checking software to stop everyday users from sharing viral misinformation. Twitter basically announced a ban on all political advertising from its platforms. And of course, then you actually had the purchase of Twitter by Elon Musk, and he basically fired a bunch of the fact checkers and went back to sort of the Wild West version of what was going on. And now you're seeing, again, a lot more misinformation finding its way onto Twitter. Newspapers are, the foundation of news. The papers of record continue to hold an influential audience. Papers of record refer to those newspapers whose editorial and news gathering quality are considered to be authoritative. Among the American papers of record include the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. For much of American history, even smaller cities had multiple independent newspapers. Even a town like Claremore would have at least 2 newspapers. But corporate ownership of newspapers has again led to the demise of a lot of the different kinds of local newspapers. The business model of the news has always been this idea of what we would call the penny press, which was emerged in the kind of 2 or 3 decades into the 19th century with the New York Herald and other kinds of mass production newspapers. And what they figured out was, we don't need to recoup our costs to make a newspaper with every subscription, right? We don't have to make the cost of the paper recoup that cost. What we need to do is sell newspapers at a loss but then grab, again, this huge audience and then sell it advertising. And that was always the genius of the penny press. And with that came, some journalistic norms, like the idea of objectivity, which was that, a newspaper's reporting practices did not pick sides. And then again, that the newspapers printed the truth without fear or favor. Large urban newspapers have seen a sharp increase in digital subscriptions. I don't know about you guys, but I get both the Post and the Times. It's a fairly reasonable price. Again, the Washington Post serves as a model for returning the news media to profitability. And again, under Jeff Bezos, the Post rebuilt into a media technology company producing over 1,200 articles, graphics, or videos a day. And the transformation of content has contributed to an explosion of digital readership. So what are the mainstream media? Most Republicans and Democrats agree. ABC News, just about everybody agrees, is part of the mainstream media. CNN, the New York Times, MSNBC, Fox News. These decline as you go along. Wall Street Journal is widely viewed again as more conservative than the Times and the Post. The New York Post is, again, a lot of liberals don't like what, their editorial page, and it goes, it declines as you go down. But if you look at the first 5 or 6 entries, those are really what we consider to be the mainstream media. Finally, television. Television still commands very large audiences, but younger Americans are the least likely to watch national and local news programs daily. Television news offers kind of a headline briefing of the news of the day, but they do very little of their own reporting and generally do not provide much in the way of context. The rise of 24-hour news, cable news stations like CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC offer slightly more detail, but again remain headline-driven and have increasingly adopted explicit partisan biases, which has largely, again, contributed to the growing partisan polarization, or maybe it simply reflects it, chicken and egg kind of question. Did the rise of cable news cause or contribute to partisan polarization, or does it simply reflect what had been going on for quite some time? Now, I'll leave that to you to consider. I have my viewpoints. We can talk about it if you want. So anyway, that is it for this presentation. When we come back, we will continue discussing different news sources and different reporting strategies, and again, how the media contribute to American federal government. I'll see you next time.